Welcome, everyone. We're excited to welcome you to the Innovate5G webinar. My name is Jennifer Fritzche. I'm going to be the moderator for today's event. I'm really excited. I think, I've learned a lot about 5G, but I've learned a lot from these panelists in prepping for this webinar. So I'm excited to share the content. I'm going to turn it over to Chris Stark to introduce himself, his bio, and a little bit about Innovate5G. Chris?
Thank you, Jennifer. So let me start with Innovate5G. Innovate5G is a company that Rashmi and I started a couple of years ago. And really the concept around Innovate5G was this, is that lots of the technology that underpins 5G, whether it's the radios, whether it's the new sort of architectures that you see, edge data centers and so on, plus spectrum was all coming together. And you could see this starting to happen. But the real problem is that the whole 5G experience was not just a consumer experience. It was all about trying to open up industry applications, enterprise applications. And really the whole business of trying to connect the application development community and this opportunity just seemed to be missing, or it looked like it was going to be really slow. So we had this idea that we would start a company that was really all about trying to connect people who could really move forward on those applications, create the value in industry and enterprise, and connect them to 5G and connect them to the 5G capabilities. So that's the genesis of the company. My background is that up until a couple of years ago, I was running strategy and business development for Nokia in North America. I did that for about 9 years. And amongst the things that I did there, I was actually one of the founders of the CBRS Alliance and served as their chairman for 2 years. Prior to that, I'd been CEO and president of startups out in California. So sort of big company, small company experience, but a lot of insight and a lot of touch on what was going to happen with 5G, which prompted the idea that we could do something really valuable in this space.
Great. Rashmi, why don't we turn it over to you for your background.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Chris. So hi, everyone. My name is Rashmi, and to give you a little bit about my background, I actually come from the telecom field. I've been here for working in the telecom field for about 25 years now. Started off in the wireless field in the late 90s with a company that is now Vodafone, and eventually moving on to more of a software development role. So by choice, I'm a software developer first. And then obviously I use my skills in the telecom arena is where I come from. And I've spent a majority of my career working in optical networks with Fujitsu, and then eventually moving into, an entrepreneurship role into startups where I felt, the real innovation actually in economy lies. And then when I met Chris a few years ago, my question to him was, what is it that we can do to create exponential innovation in this space, and specifically 5G? And that's where we actually hit upon the idea to create as many resources as possible to build an ecosystem that would allow 5G to evolve and innovate over a platform that allows many others to come in and encourage 5G development.
Great. Terrific. And just as my background, for those of you who don't know, I was an analyst following the space for about 25 years with Wells Fargo. I'm now doing some different ventures involving the spectrum side, and often pick the brains of people like Chris and Rashmi to make sure I'm on the right course. So with that, let's just kind of jump right into questions. So much of my time as an analyst, we often heard of 5G as going to be the fourth industrial revolution. When you think of the first three, of course, that was the steam engine, science and mass production, and digital technology. You can argue at least one in three of those drove connectivity, which is really what 5G is trying to do. My question to both of you is, does the fourth industrial revolution really need 5G? How do you, or is the hype too high to live up to that? Chris, you want to take that?
Sure. So, I mean, look, I actually think it doesn't. I think it would be a lot more powerful if 5G really was the engine behind it. But I'm not sure that the fourth industrial revolution or industry 4.0 that people talk about actually is going to fail if 5G doesn't deliver. And I think that's something that we all ought to be cognizant of, is that it's not a given in my mind. I think there are other technologies, there are other things that underpin Industry 4.0 anyway, and I think those transformations are going to happen, and they're happening. So no, I think it could be a lot more powerful if we deliver 5G in the right way to industry, but I don't think it's an absolute necessity.
Rashmi, do you agree with that?
Yeah, to a certain extent, yes, but I think 5G is an important building block. I mean, if it's not 5G delivering the fourth industrial revolution, at least it's a building block to something that's going to come after it. But I think what we have to work with right now is what's available in terms of the technology, and mainly, this specifically the time that we are in today with the pandemic. Connectivity is always at the core of all economic activity. I mean, if it isn't for, most of our networks working 4G right now are being pushed to the limits, and we need something better and faster. So obviously 5G is a big building block, but I'm pretty sure that as we work on this and evolve it further, the ecosystem is going to develop. But yeah, the industrial revolution definitely is on its way, and possibly, 5G is not going to be able to take it all the way, but at least it's going to start it out.
Got it. Okay. And like any, huge technology change, there's always a push-pull strategy. If you look at China's strategy with 5G, you could argue it's very different than the US. And I'm curious if you think the US is approaching it in a push or pull versus way, and is that necessarily the right way?
So look, I think I would look at places like China as a push. I think they very much from the top down set what the goal should be in terms of what they want to see in terms of infrastructure. They did it not just in telecom, but they've done it in a lot of industries. And I think the concept there is very much that you push it all in and other things will happen because it's there. Here, I don't think it's so much a push. I think it's more of a pull. I think that it's all about demand from the end user or from the enterprise or whatever that will actually make it happen. And I think that what you've seen is that lots of the building blocks that I mentioned right at the beginning are in place, or the government are putting in place with spectrum in the auctions that we've just seen and so on. But fundamentally, what's going to have to happen is that, especially in industry and enterprise, they're going to have the need, or they're going to have to connect. Why does it make a difference for them and in their terms? And I think that's a discovery that has to happen to really create the pull. And, go back to what I said right at the beginning, that's the one place that it does worry me that, that's all about having the use cases and the applications to fulfill the need. And that's the part that I worry that we're not really going to address en masse.
Got it. Rashmi, what are your thoughts?
So, everything actually, I believe in organic growth. And organic growth is mostly, I guess, a pull mechanism. It has to be driven by the consumers. It has to be driven by the end user. You may have technology in place, but if there's no place to consume it, you're probably too early for its time. So I agree with Chris on certain economies making it a big push, but I feel that that may work for some countries, but specifically for capitalistic economies, we usually believe in organic growth, and that's where we should focus our efforts in.
Got it. Okay. Is some of the ability not to push right now in the U.S. hampered or handicapped by, things like spectrum, infrastructure? The industry is just digesting. I mean, I think, payments were due to the FCC last week, a $90 billion plus auction, including the clearinghouse charges. Do we need to kind of get through that before we can even assemble a push strategy?
Yeah, I think without a doubt the building blocks had to be there, and spectrum was a big one. Obviously being intimately involved in the CBRS spectrum, which was meant to try and get spectrum into many, many hands rather than sort of concentrated, that was really, in my mind, about trying to help people explore how these types of wireless technologies can help them in their business. I think, though, that when you look at 5G, to actually capture the real three pillars of 5G, that's extreme mobile broadband, ultra low latency, high reliability, and massive machine connect, you look at that and you need big blocks of spectrum. And what was done on the C-band license, which you mentioned, I think that was very necessary to put big blocks together and try and get it into people's hands. I think inevitably, because they're big blocks, because they're valuable, it went into a lot fewer hands. But I do think that was a necessary part of the evolution of 5G. So from that perspective, yeah, I think on the equipment side and services side, I think that's all been developing anyway. It's developing around consumer more than anything, from everything I've seen. The networks that are out there are either to offer us fixed wireless access or mobility to a handset. So a lot of the industry is actually on its way. And as I say, I think the spectrum part was another big boost in terms of what's been done in the last 12 months. So, yeah, I think those are there. But, those are just the parts. Somehow you've got to connect to, if you want to go beyond consumer and you want to go beyond just streaming better videos or whatever it is, or maybe gaming, you're going to have to try and connect to enterprise and industrials about what they want. And I think that is actually a tough task, because they're not easy to get at. Unlike consumer, where you see big carriers have over 100 million subs and be able to get to them in one go. Enterprises aren't like that. Once you go past the top 500, there's a lot of them, and their needs are many. So I think getting them connected with some real value that we're going to generate, that to my mind is the part that's going to be a real slog at this point.
So what is the long pole in the tent to get that? Is it the application developer? Who's the critical segment to do just what you just said?
I think it is. I think it's a combination. One is that we have to connect with industries in the way that they recognize. I think the telecom has been very much along the lines that it sets itself out and everybody fits into it. I don't think that's going to work with enterprise and industrials. We're going to have to connect to the problems that they're solving. And so consequently, and by the way, I also think they're not going to sit around forever trying to figure out how they can take the technology that you've got over here and somehow make a value in their business. They want to be spoon-fed this. They want it in their terms. They want clear return on investment, benefits to their operation, and they need to know that it's going to get managed and it's going to operate in a way that fits with their enterprise. And so I think that's probably the hardest part, is that you've suddenly got to take this sort of ecosystem that we've generated where we all fit with it, and you've got to try and figure out how that can fit with all of these many needs that will be out there.
Got it. Okay. Rashmi, how do you think of it?
No, so to actually continue that train of thought there, you know, I mean, for anything to be adopted, you need a framework. You know, you can look at it as a push strategy or pull strategy, doesn't matter, but you still need that scaffolding. You need a framework. And I see spectrum, equipment, the tools, those are part of the framework, right? And that's where Innovate5G is also positioned. And that's where what we're trying to build here is that scaffolding. It's the framework that allows for something to be adopted. But the true adoption actually comes from, as Chris said, recognizing the problem statement. You know, what problem is it that we're trying to solve? And yeah, it is. I mean, right now there's a lot of push towards consumer 5G. But, you know, looking at the pandemic and the future of work, I think where the problem statements reside currently is more at the enterprise level, right? Because there's certain issues we are trying to fix. It could be anything from remote work to remote learning. It could be creating a more efficient pipeline for our healthcare systems. A number of problems actually do exist, and they have surfaced very recently. Not that we did not know about them, but I think we are more consciously aware of some of these problems that have appeared as a cracks in you know, the fabric of the society that we have. You know, there are gaps that need to be filled up. And where I feel our time in creating an effective framework to build upon that is providing the platforms, right? Mm-hmm. But the first thing, obviously, again, as I said, adoption has to be driven by the end user. And we feel that the right end user for this consumption at this time is really the enterprise side of things. So yeah, Chris is right. I mean, we probably want to look at, you know, what are the problems we can solve with enterprise? And in terms of that, once we understand what the problem statement is, you know, that's where the application developers come in trying to solve those problems, right? I mean, obviously, you know, the way we are set up, when we see a problem, there's actually a whole bunch of solutions that appear. And most people are trying to bring in applications that basically address certain gaps. And as far as we have a good framework in terms of spectrum, I mean, spectrum is a big piece of that equation, which I think with the release of the CBR shared spectrum in 2019 has actually spurred the growth of private wireless networks, right? Before we were talking about mostly the tier 1 MNO networks that we as consumers interact with. But now with the opening up of the shared spectrum, we have private wireless networks that have come in. And as part of the private wireless networks, what are the specific problems in a given niche area? What can be solved? Obviously, you know, we can't boil the entire ocean, but looking at small pockets of problem statements where we can bring innovation, position those frameworks, and that basically helps us. That also helps application developers to understand, you know, where they can come in and add value. So it's all about providing the right value in the right place, right? Again, you know, going by being at the right place at the right time.
Got it. Okay, that's really helpful. Okay, Chris.
Yeah, Jennifer. The other thing the other piece I was going to mention is that we've had a chance to sit with different industries and different business users, whether they're sports associations, whether they're schools, whether they're healthcare or whatever. And, you know, a typical conversation for us, so on the sports front, we sat there and we sort of said, look, this is a framework where you can actually do a myriad of things, anything video, you can have a huge number of sensors, you can connect audio, you can do all of these things. And the answer was, okay, but what problem that I've got are you going to solve? And So at that point, well, we said, well, okay, would you like, I mean, the best thing is if you could try and elaborate on the things, the problems that you've got, and we can work through it. And the problem was that we couldn't even get that conversation going, because what they actually wanted, they wanted us to actually recognize gaps in their business. They wanted us to come in and understand where they either could create more value, more money for their business, whether they could do cost savings, efficiency, things like that, or they could create something new that they could actually market. But they just wanted us to come with here you go, this is it, this is how much it's going to cost, and by the way, this is how much it's going to make you, or this is how much it's going to save you. And so I think from those, it's abundantly clear most of these people don't want to spend the time trying to figure out how it impacts their business. They just want you to come and tell them, which means you've got to know what their problems are, their business is, and you've got to connect with them. And I think traditionally in the telecom sector, we've not been very good at doing that. And I don't think we have. And you know, I go back to a couple of years ago that I sat with the Railway Commission, and we gave this massive presentation on what could be done with networking for Railway Commission. And there were about 4 different railways there. And at the end, and we got about 5 slides through, and the guys glazed over, and they said, well, actually what we'd like to do is take one of the people off the train so we don't man it with so many people. Can you fix that? And you know, and obviously the presentation didn't touch that at all, and in fact, he couldn't do it. But I think that's the problem, is that we think we've got all this cool stuff. We think we've got all of these great opportunities for people to go do things, but they're not going to sit there and figure it out. They want you to come and say, here it is. This is how we package it up. And we had another conversation about a week ago. This time, it was with education in South Africa, and same thing. There's a myriad of things that could be offered, but actually what they wanted was, come tell us what you can do and how much it's going to cost.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that's what I'm trying to connect the dots on. And so I want to bring, I think that I fully agree with you that it is about enterprise solutions, and that's probably where the carriers are going to make the money. Yet you see the carriers, namely I'll call it Verizon and T-Mobile, really pushing this consumer 5G offering. And, you know, a case could be made, they didn't even see a return on investment in 4G because remember, T-Mobile pushed them to unlimited and they kind of went kicking and screaming to follow that. How do you think the carriers are thinking about this? I mean, again, Verizon's writing a check actually that's due today to the FCC for $45 billion. So how do they justify that without incorporating an enterprise? How do you think of that?
I think that when you look at the major carriers who now hold, most of the viable spectrum for 5G, there's 3, maybe 4 that have got, massive spectrum holdings nationwide. The issue is that most of their customer base is consumer. So to monetize those assets, the first place they're going to go is to the consumer. And they're going to go to us on the mobility side, but because 5G has shown that, in fact, it can actually hit the fixed wireless access, the internet to the home, they'll hit the consumer in the home as well. And that's because their marketing and their sales and their whole organization is set up to do that. They will, I mean, this is not to say that they won't go and try and do enterprise, but generally what we hear is that, enterprises of less than 1 million square foot, they're not really going to be that interested in. So they're going to go for the really big guys and try and do something there because they have to do things on scale. And that comes back to the issue, I think, that's going to face us, is to actually make this permutate all the way down, way beyond the Fortune 500s, there's going to have to be a concerted effort to try and connect value to those enterprise and industries. And that's not a small task. And it's going to be hard for people who generally don't connect with those types of customers and haven't got set up to sell and market and so on in those domains. So I think they've got I think there's a challenge coming, but even if they get there, I mean, go back to what I said a few minutes ago. They've got to have something that they give to they've got to have something to offer the enterprise. They've got to have a solution that creates value. And it can't just be, by the way, we'll package all of your cell phone business up for all of your employees and do a discount or whatever. It's going to have to be something about their operation or whatever. And, they're going to need applications and solutions to be able to go in and try and get that value.
And Rashmi, I know you've done a lot of work with the healthcare industry. That seems like a very logical place that needs help. But how does someone, if I'm just picturing like several different consultant teams, one that can help education, one that can help healthcare, one that can help industrials, how do you think that plays out? I mean, there's so many different conversations and you really have to bring a brain trust to have those conversations. Curious.
Jennifer. Actually, I'd just like to summarize something that Chris has just said. I hope that the point is driven home. First of all, again, the technology is outcome based, and therefore networks, be it 5G or 6G or whatever, right? Whatever the new shiny technology is, the network has to be outcome based, right? We can't put network in just for the sake of a network. It has to solve somebody's problem. As far as consumer networks, T-Mobile, Verizon, and AT&T go, it's not hard for them to know. Obviously, they've been in this business for a long time. What are the needs of a consumer? And obviously, these are driven through applications. Today, a lot of us are on the streaming applications, Netflix, YouTube. Now with remote work, it's Zoom, it's, getting onto our remote working video conferencing tools. So obviously a lot of that is driven by how a consumer is using the network. We do pigeonhole our consumers quite a bit by, when something new comes around, for instance, when the shared economy came around, or even, let's look at YouTube. When it first came out in 2006, the application was here, but the network wasn't. We couldn't necessarily deliver what the application was trying to deliver to the end customer. Obviously, the network was on a lag and it caught on. And eventually it led to the shared economy. In a way, you can say that 4G almost ushered in, when we brought in 4G to do streaming, almost ushered in the shared economy. Uber and Airbnb wouldn't have existed for the capacity in the network, to look at where your car is on the map and know exactly when it is turning up at your corner. That needs a lot more than just a new business model, right? It needs the bandwidth and the latency in the network to provide that. Now, as far as consumer networks are concerned, they kind of feel like they know the consumer, this is only so far that they're going to go. Maybe there might be another application, but how far could it fall from how far could the apple fall from that tree? But when we come to, and that's why there are a lot more people trying to deliver to consumers, because it's they're trying to do a one size fits all. And that works, that business model does work. We've seen it, be it internet to our homes, to our phones, one size does fit all as far as consumers are concerned. However, when you come to private wireless networks, one size does not fit all. And that's your comment, is that we need to address every solution, and no one solution is the same as another solution, right? Even in the case of hospital, it could be a different level of a hospital. It could be a emergency hospital versus a cardiology hospital, and they both each have different needs. So we have been working in the healthcare sector now very recently, with the help of some folks that we've brought in from the healthcare management area. And what is very clear to us is, even if we do develop a solution for an enterprise, it may not apply to all enterprises. And that's where it takes a lot more effort, where I feel T-Mobile, Verizon, AT&T are not going to put that effort in to try and understand each one's problems on a separate level and trying to say, hey, I'm going to tailor a solution towards you. I'm going to tailor something. I'm going to build something. And as Chris said, it goes beyond just trying to package phones for your employees when they come in, so on and so forth. It's more about trying to understand what business case, what is your business? What is your business model? How can we make you, how can we take you further from where you are? And that's where every solution needs to be tailored in, which is a tall order.
Yes, absolutely.
It is a lot of work to try and sit down, as Chris mentioned, talking to railways. You have to sit down and talk, literally run a survey before we actually say that we know how to fix this, or this is a solution towards it.
Yeah, there's no substitute. You have to have some understanding of their business and their problems, and I think that's been a lesson of learning for the last 6 to 9 months for us. Is that you're going to have to invest to understand their business, and just pitching up and saying, here's a suitcase of everything you could imagine. Go pick what you want. They're not going to do it.
They're not going to do it. So I just want to mention we have about 10 minutes left, and there is Q&A opportunity in the chat box on the Zoom, so feel free to ask any questions. But we've definitely identified the issues, and I think it's, again, connecting the dots. When you look at CBRS bidders, there weren't a lot of dedicated enterprises, as I remember, which is surprising. And then you look at C-band, and it was something like 96% of that spectrum was bought by the 3 carriers, who are so big and not nimble enough maybe to invest. So I'd love to kind of, I know this webinar is going to be a series. And what are the next topics? I think we've identified a strong foundation that you all want to communicate to the audience as to what's the next thing to uncover.
So look, I first off, I think this is a big problem. It's a complex one. We're a small company. We're not going to try and boil the ocean here. We've picked our topic, which is, we believe that if you can create opportunity for application developers and you can connect them to the right facilities and you can connect them to ways to understand what they're trying to achieve for an end user, people will come and innovate en masse. And that's all we've been focused on, is how do we get that dynamic going? And quite honestly, most of what's done, I fully expect won't succeed. It'll be that sort of Darwinian thing. You'll have lots of people come, lots of people try, and the good ones will go forward, and the ones that don't won't. But I think that, go back to this pull push concept. I think that's fundamental to the whole pull, is that you try and put as much effort in to the base problem, which is creating the business outcomes that matter. And then you create the demand that pulls everything from the network down. So while, I say that we're sitting here and private wireless networks are generally what we try and look at, and what we're looking at trying to facilitate for application developers, quite frankly, if an application developer's got a really great application, good value, good cost, and there's a good outcome to it, I think you could take any of the big guys and they would have success selling it as well. So I don't think it's like this is all about the little guy and they're going to take over the world or anything. It's more about attack the fundamental problem, create the value and the demand and the need in the industry enterprise. That will suck all of the connectivity and so on, because they'll pay for it. As long as they know what they're going to get, they'll pay for it.
Rashmi, thank you for accommodating. Sorry about that technical blip. But Rashmi, I was curious if you had comments on Chris's statements.
Yeah, as I said, in the consumer world, one size fits all. But as far as the enterprise world is concerned, there's actually a lot of opportunities for application developers to come in and fix many different types of issues. So, it's not like there can be only one Uber or there can be only one Lyft or one Airbnb, in the consumer world, yes, we are constrained. It's a bottleneck. It's like a few companies get through. A lot of applications come in, they funnel through, and they don't make it eventually. But sorry about that. But in the enterprise world, that's where we see there's such a huge demand and such an opportunity for application developers to step in, and it's not like a few applications are needed. I mean, this is actually almost the wild west of 5G world right now that we're talking about. And if you notice, Chris has a cowboy hat, one of our photographs, and it really warrants his cowboy hat at that point. Is this is truly the wild west of 5G, where application developers can come and make a huge impact. And it's not the onesies and twosies. I mean, everybody has an opportunity to come in, and that's where we're trying to create a bigger funnel, providing the platform and framework that allows for anyone to come and test their ideas. And if it's an idea that solves a problem, it can be out there. And that's what we would cover in the next webinar is, how we are solving the problem, what are the opportunities we are providing to application developers to come in and be part of this.
Great. And I'm going to close with that. I mean, just one of the more interesting things I thought in the survey that many of the attendees filled out before this webinar, 68% felt that 5G would be here today or used this year, 2021. I think based on our findings from today, that's probably going to prove to be very immature or premature rather. And as you look back to the first industrial revolution with the steam engine, it feels like we're just in the initial stages of laying the tracks per se. And 5G certainly will be part of that opportunity. And what's to come is still many different chapters to play out. So I want to thank Rashmi, I want to thank Chris, I want to thank Innovate5G for asking me to do this. It's been a great use of my time and learnings and continues to make me smarter. So thanks for letting me pick your brains. And everyone, look forward to the next webinar and stay tuned for news on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Our pleasure.